following. One is that to be able to address such inequalities that affect indigenous communities, it is important for us to acknowledge that these inequalities exist. That's the first step. And then go further to ensure sustained investments in community-controlled solutions to drive change. And such things call for global campaigns. Like, for example, we want to see the United Nations, we want to see development partners, multilateral and bilateral, development initiatives, championing and recognizing that poor, non-communicable disease-related health outcomes of indigenous people affect them, and not only affecting their health, but also their well-being. So coming out strongly to invest more resources, invest more research, invest more technology to addressing such challenges. And also, we know that such initiatives, such campaigns, if driven by global bodies, they provide a source of global pressure to help support the work of local grassroots indigenous groups, like the ones we have in this room, and especially the lovely people who reached out to me to make this presentation. Additionally, there is need to make space for dialogue within the civil society discourse through placement of the word indigenous in all World Health Organization documents and processes and declarations and protocols. That runs me to the agenda that we are discussing in this World Health Assembly, even as you are present in Geneva, the universal health coverage. Where are the needs and aspirations and priorities of indigenous communities? Are they represented in the room? Do we see their needs captured on the papers, the declaration statements, and other things? Do we have representatives of indigenous communities speaking out, influencing and shaping the agenda? Because it is this same agenda that will define resources, where resources are going to be allocated. The Family Plan in 2020, the Global Strategy for Women, Children, and Adolescent Health, universal health coverage, primary health care, the Sustainable Development Goals, global education programs. Do we see them directly addressing the needs of indigenous communities? And particularly being specific to focus on women, girls, elderly, disabled people, all those different categories of indigenous communities. So that's how important it is to make sure that the issues of language come out strongly. And also given the enormous and inequitable burden NCDs place on indigenous communities around the world, it's important that we really make sure that these processes have priorities of indigenous communities involved. Without inclusive language, the needs and priorities of indigenous people and cultures risk being ignored altogether. To this end, we must ensure meaningful inclusion and acknowledgement of indigenous people and cultures within the United Nations global political declarations. We must acknowledge the important role, this is actually my last statement as I wind up, is that we must acknowledge the important role that indigenous community-controlled health organizations play in driving equity for indigenous people living with and at the risk of NCDs. And also we must acknowledge the need to prioritize indigenous communities and the challenges they face addressing NCDs across the globe. We must articulate the need to eliminate indigenous specific racism across the globe. We cannot stand to see discrimination and racism and stigma among indigenous communities anymore, because they are already marginalized and left behind. And then lastly, we must involve the indigenous people within the global NCD discourse. This is with a view for indigenous communities to engage with governments, to inform and lead culturally safe and appropriate approaches to sustainably meet the Sustainable Development Goals, the Universal Health Coverage Goals, the Primary Health Care Goals, and also to reduce inequitable impact of non-communicable diseases on indigenous communities. I thank you.